Revenge films. My mother-in-law, Rose, took my baby daughter out without my permission. The baby bottles and baby formula that I brought is still sitting on the table, so I thought that they were just out for a walk or something, but they still haven't returned. I ran around town, searching all the stops that I could think of, and called my husband and police as well, but no luck. My mother-in-law doesn't have a cell phone, so there's no way to know where she is or get in touch with her. What an unnerving situation. It means that my daughter hadn't eaten anything for hours, and I was very worried. As it was getting dark outside, I got a call from the hospital. My daughter was in the hospital from a heat stroke and dehydration. I rushed to the hospital, and according to the doctor, my daughter was barely conscious when she was carried in. I felt despair and resentment as I sat there and watched my daughter, who was unresponsive. I was losing it. I knew that I had to be there to support her, but just the thought of my daughter dying in front of my eyes made me so scared that all I could do was cry. A few days later, my daughter regained consciousness, but she was still very weak. Of course, I was angry at my mother-in-law, but I also blamed myself for not being able to save her earlier. Apparently, my mother-in-law had plans to eat with her friend and brought my daughter with her. She still has an old way of thinking and thought that babies had to be warm. So she put multiple layers of clothes on my child, even though it was a very hot day. Normally, I give her milk from her baby bottle to drink, but that day, my mother-in-law was giving her juice. I thought it was crazy that she would even think about giving a baby a can of juice. Obviously, my daughter didn't know what to do with that can, so she was unable to drink anything. She was crying in complaint at first, but gradually her cries became fainter, so Rose thought that she was getting sleepy and just left her. Rose had explained all of this to my husband, and I could feel my mind going blank. A roller coaster of emotions like anger, sorrow, and murderous intentions were exploding within me. After Rose met with her friend, she tried showing off my daughter and playing with her, but she wasn't responding. This is finally when Rose noticed that something was wrong, and she asked one of the staff members for the number for the hospital. The staff member who responded just happened to also be a mother of children. "Oh no, she's in critical condition. Call an ambulance immediately." And that's how my daughter ended up in the hospital. I heard that the lady at the restaurant tried all kinds of things to hydrate my daughter while they were waiting. She was already too weak to swallow at that point. And the doctor explained to me at the hospital what Rose had said when my daughter got carried in. Her mother just left this child with me and went somewhere. I tried my best, but I wasn't given any explanation, so this isn't my fault. I tried calling the mother as well, but she wouldn't pick up her phone. After hearing this explanation, the hospital thought at first that I was neglecting my child, but as they kept talking to Rose, they started realizing that her story and actions didn't quite align.
Are you sure that your daughter-in-law just left her daughter with you? Please, give us her number so we can talk to her properly.
Well, you know.
If you can't give us her number, we'll have no choice but to notify the police.
Rose had no choice but to admit to everything. This was the first time that my daughter's life was in danger. But there had been many incidents in the past where I felt like Rose's interaction with my daughter was problematic. There were times that I had gotten angry and discussed it with my husband, but all he would tell me was,
"She's old, it can't be helped. You're overreacting."
He would always take her side like that and try to make me sound crazy. I was sure that he would take his mother's side again this time, because when he got to the hospital, instead of worrying about his own daughter who was on the verge of death, he was concerned by his mother, who was scolded by the doctors, and took her home with him. I was ready to yell at Rose, but I got yelled at by him instead.
My mother is in shock. Have some sympathy.
Are you serious right now? Our daughter got kidnapped and almost killed. Have some sympathy, you say? Who the hell are you to tell me such a thing? What about sympathy for me or our daughter? I was filled with rage, but his words were so shocking. All I could do was stand there in awe. My husband must love his mother more than our daughter. After a brief explanation from the doctor, I was allowed to see my daughter for a little bit. Watching her lay there with her eyes shut just made me cry. If I knew something like this was going to happen, I would have cut ties with my in-laws days ago. But whenever I told my husband that I didn't want to visit his parents, he would get mad.
Do you have human emotions? It's your responsibility as my wife to show your face and bring our daughter to see her grandmother.
I should have refused to comply. I was filled with regret. I got home fairly late at night, but my husband was nowhere to be seen. I had to let him know how our daughter was doing, so I called him up.
My mother is distressed. I can't let her deal with this on her own. I'm going to spend the night and try to keep her calm.
I had sent him a text telling him that I was going to explain everything the doctors told me when I got home, but I guess he chose his mother once again. All I could do was force a laugh. I gathered my things and put them in a bag, along with my daughter's necessities. I got prepared to leave and stayed at a hotel that night. The next day, Rose showed up at the hospital. I had warned the nurses not to let her anywhere near my daughter, so she was forced to leave. Of course, my husband found out about this and was furious.
She's our daughter's grandmother. Why can't she see her?
Grandmother, eh? Also, the person who almost killed our daughter. Either way, the hospital only lets a select few people in the ICU, so she wouldn't have been allowed to meet her granddaughter anyways. She wasn't happy with the decision and kept coming back to the hospital and wandered around. I found out that my husband had secretly tried to sneak Rose in, but was stopped by the nurses and made a big scene at the hospital. My daughter recovered bit by bit and was moved to a normal hospital bed. And now Rose became a bigger problem. My husband had told Rose that she would be able to see our daughter as much as she liked once she was transferred. I didn't want the person who almost killed my daughter going anywhere near her, so as a last resort, I called my father up. My parents had divorced when I was a child, and my mother had already passed away. My father was remarried and had a new family, so I hadn't talked to him for the past 10 years. But I was already planning on divorcing my husband, and I couldn't live in a hotel with my daughter. And more than anything, I didn't want Rose anywhere near my child. So I called my father and told him everything. As we talked, I was reminded of my own stupidity, the fear of almost losing my child, the anxiety of divorce, and all the other roller coaster of emotions I had felt over the past few days, and sobbed over the phone. My father quietly heard me out and told me that he understood.
I'll prepare a room for you and your daughter immediately. So ask the hospital to transfer her to a nearby hospital when she's out of the ICU.
I did as he said and discussed it with the hospital. My request was accepted, so I transferred my daughter to a different hospital while my husband was at work. My daughter was feeling much better by then, so it was an easy move. And I saw my father for the first time in 10 years. He hadn't changed at all. His new wife was a very gentle person as well. After explaining to my father about the divorce, he introduced me to a lawyer friend of his, and even offered to pay for all the legal fees. Then, as expected, my phone started exploding with phone calls from my husband. He was really angry about the transfer that he wasn't notified about.
Where is our daughter? My mom has been waiting to see her.
With everything going on, I was shocked that his priority was still his own mother. I explained to him that I was set on divorce, and all further arrangements would be done through my lawyer. But he wasn't interested at all in what I had to say.
Shut up! Hurry up and come home!
He continued to yell at me like that for a while. My father wanted to talk to him and get a word in, but I didn't want my husband to know where I was, so I refused. I hated bringing my daughter over to my in-laws' place because whenever we would go, Rose would try to feed her hamburgers or chewed up food directly from her mouth. But I never expected her to be this stupid. I should have seen this coming. The lawyer that my father introduced me to was very good. He dealt with my husband and Rose, and after hearing everything that happened, he assured me that it would be a quick divorce. I was relieved to hear that. Honestly, I expected to be rejected when I contacted my father because we hadn't spoken in so long, but I'm very grateful that he didn't. He has a child with his new wife as well, but my father and stepmother both are in love with their first grandchild.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.